With more rays of hope in mind, Romeo took leave of priest Lawrence by night. He gained secret entry to the chamber of Lady Juliet. He told her he would stay with her that night and before daybreak proceed to Mantua alone. It's a place, Mantua, where he is going to disguise that, as directed by the good priest who solemnized their marriage. Juliet was overjoyed when she saw Romeo entering through the orchard where they confessed their love for the first time. For them, the night was one of joy and happiness, but the pleasures and delight they experienced was overshadowed by gloom of the day's fateful events. Rays of the morning sun began to appear on the eastern horizon, and Romeo took leave from Juliet with a heavy heart. He promised to write to her from Mantua every now and then. Climbing down from her chamber window, Romeo stood still for a moment. He had to depart quickly. If he was found with the city after daybreak, it meant death to him, under the royal command of the prince. He moved out in a haste and disappeared from the view of the lovely weeping Juliet. Another tragedy, in the meanwhile, was slowly taking shape for the young pair of lovers. The old Lord Capulet met young and noble Count Paris and wanted to have him as his son-in-law. Paris was a youth extremely handsome and gentle in behavior. Juliet herself would have embraced him if she had not seen Romeo before. No one objected to the proposal of Lord Capulet that Count Paris should marry Lady Juliet. Everyone said Count Paris was the most suitable match for Lady Juliet. Juliet was terrified and fell into depth of sorrow when she learned about her father's offer for her marriage with Count Paris. She tried her best to get out of the marriage plan again. Grieved at the recent death of cousin Tybalt, she was not suitable for a marriage at that time. She could not face her husband with joy and happiness fit for a bride. Also, it was improper for the family of the Capulets to celebrate a marriage when the funeral formalities of Tybalt were only just over, she argued. Lord Capulet didn't listen to any of her excuses or arguments. He ordered her to get ready for the marriage on the next Thursday. The poor old father never knew that his daughter had entered into another marriage already. So he was sure she would gracefully accept the marriage he proposed. Her objections came out of only natural shyness, he thought. Juliet did not know what to do. She went to Priest Lawrence, who was always the counselor of people in distress. He listened to her patiently and sympathized with her predicament. Then the thoughtful priest sat silently for some time with his eyes closed. The priest directed her to go home and pretended to be merry. Merry means happy. She should agree to marry the count as designed by her father on the night before the day of marriage. She was to drink the liquid. Please note, this is a very important part. She was to drink the liquid drug in a phial given by the priest. It would keep her unconscious with all symptoms of death. All symptoms of death for 42 hours. 42 hours after drinking the liquid. At the appointed time of marriage, she would be seen as dead and she would then be placed on a coffin like wooden stand and kept in the family vault for burial, as was the custom. After 42 hours, she will get up as if from a dreamy sleep. By that time, the priest said he would get Romeo back from Mantua to rescue her and take her to Mantua. Juliet thought for a while about the horrible adventure she was to undertake. Love for Romeo and fear for a marriage with Paris gave her courage to try any adventure. Juliet agreed to observe the directions of the priest, and with the fuel given by him, she went back to her home. Leaving the monastery, Juliet went to the young Count Paris and told him that she was glad to marry him and become his wife. Lord Capulet and his wife were overjoyed at the news of Juliet going and meeting Count Paris with her consent to the wedding. The old lord felt that he had regained his youthful days. Juliet, who displeased him first with her refusal of Paris, became once again the favorable darling of the loving father. Preparations for a most grand wedding began to bustle at the orders of Lord Capulet. No cost was considered high for anything to make the marriage the most fabulous in the history of Verona. Juliet drank the contents of the phial from the priest on the night of Wednesday. Actually, the marriage should be on Thursday. So, she drank that phial the night of Wednesday. Listen this carefully. Before consuming the contents, the liquid drug, she was sadly thoughtful. She did not suspect the priest for not even a moment. But would it have the same effect the priest told her? Will it really kill her? There's a dilemma in her. Or else, being with the dead bones of many Capulets' ancestors in the valleys can drive her mad and leave her dead at the end. She was terrified to think about such possibilities. Finally, the love for Romeo prevailed and she desperately drank the liquid substance and swallowed it in one gulp and fell unconscious. The young Count Paris came in the morning with the music to awaken his bride. There was no living Juliet in her chamber. Everybody was stunned at the sight of her lifeless body. Confusion, gloom, and grief ran through the house. Count Paris lamented the most untimely and premature death of his previous bride. His precious bride. The mourning of the poor old Lord Capulet and his wife were more heart-rending. Juliet was their only child. Death snatched away their sweet child from them. They wept. All the arrangements made for the merry marriage were turned into accompany the most sad funeral. Happy bridal music changed to sorrowful hymns. The noisy instruments were withdrawn and melancholy bells took over. The priest, who came to solemnize the marriage in bright colors, turned into black robes means dress, to perform the gloomy burial. Romeo on Mantua was shocked to hear that his beloved lady was dead. Bad news travels always faster than the good. It reached Romeo much before the priest's message saying that the death of Juliet was only pretended, only acting, and that she was really awaiting his arrival in Verona. Romeo ordered his horse to be ready to go to Verona that night to see his beloved Juliet in her tomb for the last time. The desperate Romeo went in search of a poor drugstore keeper. Please note, the chemist was broken and he had been almost on the verge of starvation. Romeo offered him gold as price for some poison. He purchased poison from the drugstore keeper, and obtained it on bargain. Armed with the poison from the drugstore, Romeo proceeded to Verona. He wanted to see his lady once more in the tomb and then swallow the poison and get buried near her. His plan was like that. Reaching Verona at midnight, Romeo went out to the churchyard where the ancient tomb of the Capulets was situated. As he was about to break open the tomb wall with a spade and an iron rod, someone halted him. Someone stopped him. The voice called him Cruel Monte and asked him to desist from his unlawful business of digging out the tomb. It was the young Count Paris who came with flowers to be strewn on the grave of Juliet, who was to be his beloved wife. But for her untimely death, Count Paris did not know what Romeo was up to and the reason for his doing so. But the Count thought that Romeo, being a Montague, sworn enemy of all Capulets, was trying to tamper with the dead body of the Capulet lady with the intention to bring shame on the name of the dead. In an angry tone, the Count asked Romeo to keep back so that he could be taken to the law and be condemned to death for having come up with his banishment. Romeo pleaded with Paris to leave him alone. He asked Paris to quit the place. He warned him if he insisted in provoking his anger, he would have to meet his fate just as that of Tybalt, who lay dead in the tomb. The Count scorned him and refused to oblige Romeo. He caught hold of Romeo, who resisted. A fight ensued between Count Paris and Romeo, at the end of which Paris fell dead. Romeo was terribly sorry for having killed the poor Count Paris. As a penance, he decided to place the body of Count Paris buried in Juliet's grave. He opened her grave and saw the lady as fresh as alive, but with no sign of life on the body. Tybalt's body also lay nearby. Romeo said he would repent by killing Tybalt's murderer. And then, after kissing his lady's lips, Romeo swallowed the poison he brought from the Monte drug store from the poor chemist. Its operation was real and fatal. It was not like the drug just Juliet drank, the effect of which was now expiring as promised by the priest. But when Juliet was about to wake up, Romeo had fallen dead as the poison he took was quick in its results. Priest Lawrence had learnt that his messenger to Mantua was detained somewhere and could not deliver the message in time to Romeo. The priest hurried to the tomb at the promised hour of Juliet's awakening, armed with an axe and a lantern to rescue her out. But when he saw a lantern already burning in the Capulet tomb, moving nearer, the priest was shocked to see the breathless bodies of Romeo and Count Paris lying near the tomb. Juliet awoke out of her trance before the priest could try to figure out what had happened there before his arrival. When she saw the priest, she remembered the place where she was then and asked for Romeo. By the time noises of approaching people came to the ears of the priest, he walked quickly out of the place, asking Juliet to follow him. But before Juliet could follow the priest, she saw the poison bottle closed in the hands of Romeo and was convinced that he died after consuming poison due to some misunderstanding. She kissed his lips and wanted to have the same poison to die. She knew that a crowd of people was approaching and she drew a dagger and stabbed herself and fell dead by the side of Romeo. The, pre- the prince commanded the priest to speak about all he knew about the strange and disastrous events at the grave at night. And Priest Lawrence was speechless for a short while. He was trembling and with tears in his old venerable eyes. Then he spoke in the presence of the lords of all Montague and Capulet, telling the story of their children's fatal love. He confessed his part in encouraging their marriage in the hope that it would end the age old enmity between the two great families. He related how Romeo and Juliet got married. The priest admitted that he gave Juliet the sleeping draught to avoid the crime of a second marriage, which she hated. He had sent letters of intimation to Romeo in Mantua, but the messengers could not reach him in time to follow the priest's instructions to come and rescue Juliet out. The priest himself came to the grave to get Juliet out of the coffin vault, where he saw Romeo and Count Paris dead. He knew nothing more or less about the unfortunate events by the side of the grave. The patient prince turned to the lords of Montague and Capulet and told the sad old men that even the heavens could not forgive them for their irrational enmity. The love of their children that culminated in their death was the punishment delivered by heavens for the offense of quarrel between the families, the prince said. The old rivals, Montague and Capulet, in the presence of the prince and the priest, agreed to bury their enmity in the grave of their children. They shook hands, calling each other by the name of brother. A fearful Lord Montague said he would raise a golden statue for the lovely Juliet, who laid down her life to be true and faithful to her wedded husband and love. Lord Capulet made known his intention to erect another golden statue for Romeo near one to be got up for Juliet. The kindly old lords were trying to outsmart each other in their courtesies, but they were too late. The deadly rage and enmity in the past had taken the lives of two of the most promising young people among them. The golden statues of Romeo and Juliet came up, esteemed in their richness and craft that had a matchless sparkle in them. Thank you very much, dear students.